Okay, let's take some time to look at our final lesson in Unit 9, which is Lesson 9.7, and it's introducing the idea of the power of a significance test. So last class we talked about type 1, type 2 error, which is a feature of any test. If we were going to look at this and recall what we did yesterday, remember that we have what the truth is. And the truth is either that HO is true or HA is true, right? Those are our two options for the truth. But then our two decisions are that we will either, well, let me give a little bit more space for this. Our decisions are either that we will reject the null or fail to reject, or not reject, however you want to do that. And that's all about the null, right? So if we reject the null and the null is true, we made a type 1 error. That was a frowny face, if you remember. If we fail to reject the null and the null is true, then that's great. We did a good job. That doesn't really have a name. Over here, if the truth is that the alternate, ha, is true, but we failed to reject the null, then that is our type 2 error. And then this right here was another correct decision. This is when alternate is true and we have find convincing evidence, so we reject the null. And that is what we call the power of the test, right? It's the probability that the alternate will be true and we detect it, that we reject the null when the alternate's true, okay? So we're just going to talk about what the power is and how to interpret it. Really, all you need to be able to do is interpret the power of the test, and then you got to be able to tell me ways to increase the power of the test. So as we're working through this, if you're looking at this and you're like, that is super confusing, I don't really understand how power works, go back and just focus on these two things. Memorize how to interpret the power, and then make sure you can tell me ways to increase the power. That's really the most important thing. All right, let's do a little bit of review here. We're going back to Miss Gallus and her free throw shooting. Recall that she claims she's an 80% free throw shooter, and Mr. Wilcox is skeptical and believes she's less than 80%. And so she decided she's going to take another SRS of 50 free throws, okay? So let's just do some review of writing our hypotheses in this scenario, right? So we are going to assume that she is 80%, and we're going to see if we can gather evidence that she's less than 80. And remember that P is the true proportion of free throws that Miss Gallus makes. Okay, of all free throws. All right, so now let's look back. I would like for you to look back at your notes from last time, and we're going to describe a type 2 error in this setting, all right? So type 2, remember, that is going to be where the alternate is true, but we fail to reject the null. Okay, so in this case, we would say Miss Gallus is actually a less than 80% free throw shooter. So that's the alternate being true. So Miss Gallus is a less than 80% free throw shooter. So the alternate's true. That's great. But we don't find convincing evidence, right? We fail to find convincing evidence of that fact. Okay, that's how we would describe a type 2 error. Okay, so we are assuming that Miss Gallus is not an 80% now. To talk about power, it's attached to type 2 error. So here's what we're going to do. Suppose that Mrs. Gallus's true free throw percentage is actually 66%, right? If that were the case, that would mean that the HA is true, right? If she's actually 66%, then the alternate is true, all right? So what I want you to do now is I want you to go to the applet that is linked here. You can just type it into as on the URL line, and we're gonna click it to display type 2 error. And in the next video, go ahead and set it up. She's taking 50 free throws. The null hypothesis is that the P is 0.80, and the alternate is that P is 0.66. And we're gonna look at a couple distributions, and I'm gonna explain a couple of things to you on that next video.